Welcome to Cinemaholics. We have a special early episode we're doing. We usually record the show a little bit later in the week, but this is kind of a fun little hybrid bonus episode. How about that? I'm John Negroni from San Francisco, and of course, the young folks and school awards watch, all that fun stuff. Will Ashton is here as well, pop culture writer for Cinema Blind.
Hey there.
And we have a special guest. She is an entertainment and health reporter for the Desert Sun and a contributor to Next Best Picture. Welcome to Cinemaholics for the first time, Emma Sasek.
Hey guys, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for coming on and talking about a movie that I think is gonna run us over. That's for sure.
Yes.
We're talking about Titane, and we want to make sure because our listeners they're a sensitive bunch, right? We don't like to scare them. We don't like to spring new guests on them. This is how it is, but. We thought, okay, well, let's get Emma in on this so people can be like, who is this person, and can we trust her? Is she awesome? So Emma, we were going to ask you a question. I already kind of gave you a little bit of a heads up, a little bit of a warning. I didn't want to completely put you on the spot, but since we are talking about a movie that has to do with cars and a romantic movie about cars, if you will, what is like a fan favorite car-related movie that you really, really love? Maybe it's like, I don't know if it's a guilty pleasure or if it's something you wish more people liked, but just, what's one you want to shout out? Kind of let the listeners know this is who I am.
Well, I believe that Herbie Fully Loaded was just totally snubbed at the Oscars, starring
of course
who should have been Academy Award winner Lindsay Lohan. Love the movie. It has brought me so many near and dear childhood memories. It's been a long, long time since I've watched this movie. It came out in 2005, but I just remember it being a good time. So that is my pick for tonight.
There we go. I saw that in the theater.
Oh, really?
Wow.
I did.
I didn't see it in theaters, but I remember the lead up to the film, I became obsessed for like 6 months with the Herbie movies. Like I saw them all. I was like weirdly just very like adamant about getting to know Herbie.
You were a Herbie completionist in 2005.
I need to know everything.
I remember because I was like 14-ish when this movie was coming out, and there were 3 movies in 2005. I remember me and the Playground Kids, the Lynchburg, Virginia boys, and we were looking at 3 movies, and we were arguing what's going to be the big hit of the year. Is going to be The Pacifier, Sky High, or Herbie Fully Loaded. That was what was on our minds, and I did not say Herbie Fully Loaded. Sorry.
Since you mentioned it, I do really love Sky High. That was a great time.
That's what I picked. I was like, that's the movie. That's going to get everybody talking.
Another movie that lost the Oscar that year.
I don't know. Those 3 movies, which one is the most like pop culturally remembered? Like what's the one that you think most people remember between those 3? I have no idea.
I couldn't tell you. No, I couldn't tell you either. I guess, I don't know. Sky High, I feel like is associated with a lot of good childhood memories just because it's superhero. They were the original Avengers. That's the whole idea behind the Avengers, Sky High.
Yeah. Yeah. Harry Potter superheroes. That was what I came to see, and I got it. So, but we're not talking about Sky High or superheroes or not even Herbie Fully Loaded, but close to it. We're talking about Titane. Which, apologies listeners, I know we finally started pronouncing it correctly last week, but Will and I have been all over the map in terms of this movie. As you all know, our French pronunciation could use a remedial class for sure. We've been calling it Titane, Titane. It's been ridiculous, but it's Titane.
I feel bad for all the times we call it Tintin. We confused our listeners.
The adventures of we got the listeners excited. It's like, oh, they're gonna cover that movie finally.
Tintin, yeah. Tintin 2. Where is Tintin 2?
I don't know how to tell you this.
Hugh Jackson was supposed to make that.
Oh, we'll have to have a conversation after the show. I don't want to ruin your spirits right now, but here's something that'll boost your mood, Will Ashton. This is a new film written and directed by Julia Ducournau. I hope I'm pronouncing that right, but she directed a film that you really liked called Raw from a few years ago.
Yes.
Yeah.
In my top 3 for 2017, if I'm not mistaken.
You said top 5 the last time we talked about it. It's moving up.
I looked it up. I put it in my top 3.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, thanks for fact checking. I love it.
Big fan of that film.
I liked that film better the second time. I don't know if I ever told you when I watched it.
Oh, you saw
again.
it twice?
I did. I rewatched it like a year. I was like during the pandemic. I think it was after one of our, world famous arguments about that movie.
Sure.
And I was like, I'll show him. I'll watch it again, and I'll have the same opinion. Then I was like, this is low key pretty good, and I didn't want to tell you because I was embarrassed. I was gonna ask Emma if you liked it.
Yeah, I only watched it once. I did really enjoy it, but it's one of those movies where one and done, you're just kind of like, all right, I've seen all I've ever needed to see for that. Thank you. Goodbye. That was a fun
Yeah.
time, and I'm going to try to go to sleep.
I had a stomach ache. I have stomach aches during these movies. I have to like fast before I watch a Duke film. But you know, what are you gonna do? That's how
Yeah,
you
I
know it
was.
has an impact.
Yeah, I was actually reading an interview of hers recently, and she was talking about like the provocative stuff in her movies. Just like I don't know. I mean, like for this movie, it's like yeah, there are like two scenes in this that are kind of hard to watch, but I don't know. I think they're fine. Like yeah,
I think she just has a
she's
strong
hardcore.
stomach or something. Yeah,
Yeah.
to her, it's just like, you know what I mean? Like she puts her hand on the stove, she doesn't feel anything, and she's curious why people make a big fuss. So
Well, I mean, she knows how they were made, so I mean, maybe she's just like, yeah, you know, why is everyone being a baby? This is fun. You know,
it's either that or she knows. Like I don't know. I feel like she does know that people have that reaction, and it's what she sets out to do, and I respect that. But let's get into the center. What is this movie? So Titane, as we said, she wrote and directed this film. And I kind of looked this up because there have been like reviews popping around about this movie, and I've been so curious because it is one of those movies. Like after I watched it, I was like, I have to hear it from the horse's mouth. I mean, Julia Ducournau, what's going on? Like, where did this come from? Apparently, she had like a fever dream at one point where she had and I won't actually give away what the fever dream is because it kind of spoils part of this movie, but it does have to do with this kind of automobile erotic fantasy sort of thing and an extension of that idea. And if that doesn't really make any sense, I guess I could paint like the beginning of this movie is like we meet this young woman after like a cold open and everything, who just seems to have this like connection to cars that makes her like, I don't know, act a certain way. Again, I'm not sure how much to give away here. The main character is played by Agathe Roussel, and I know like literally right before this we were like looking up videos of pronunciations and I'm already losing it, so I want to turn it over to Emma because I think Emma, you'll probably do a better job of all the pronunciations. But what is Titane about, and what did you think after you watched this movie? Like after it ended, like what was your immediate reaction?
Sure. Do we want to start a little bit with that cold open, or should we kind of leave that as a mystery to people?
I think what do you think, Will? I think we could say like she gets injured in a car accident, right?
Yeah, I mean the head brace is like a big key component of the marketing, and like that was like the first major still. So I think that's fair to say. I mean, if you don't want to specify how that happens, you can be vague, but I think that's fair.
Sure. So our young heroine, she was involved in an automobile accident when she was younger, which, you know, may explain some of those connections that she may have with cars. But we see her as like a late teenager in her 20s woman who is she's involved in those car shows where, you know, women are kind of all over the cars, really showing them off. They're in quite revealing outfits. So we see that she's a type of performer, and you know, she attracts some fans who, you know, to their I don't really know what to say in terms of that. They learn a different side of Alexis. Is that her name? Is that her character's name? Alexia, excuse me. Alexia. The fans learn a different side of Alexia once they get to meet her in person. But there's just this unbelievable connection that she has to automobiles, which leads to one of the most wild scenes that you may ever see in a movie. And if you have seen Raw, you know some of the things that Julia Ducournau is capable of doing with characters, but I feel like this kind of tops it in terms of like the wow factor and things that you can just imagine. And then from that point on, I know that the trailer really kind of kept things quiet in terms of this film, but we kind of get to see Alexia go on a journey that involves you know, relationships, connecting with other people around her, more specifically Vincent Lindon's character, who we meet later on in the film. And, you know, I really tried going into this movie knowing as little as possible, and I feel like that's the best way to treat a Julia Ducournau joint, if you will. So I was honestly in on the ride for the entire time. I like I squealed and I gasped. And one writer who contributes to Next Best Picture with me, he and I were watching it together, and he heard some very interesting sounds coming out of my mouth when a lot of crazy scenes were happening. So I was fully invested in this film, and it's wild. It's definitely a fever dream. Julia Ducournau had a fever dream herself. This film is a fever dream in and of itself, but I think you have to give her a lot of credit for the creative juices that she has flowing. I question what this woman eats and drinks and what a day-to-day basis looks like for her in order for her to think of these crazy ideas. But I definitely give her a lot of credit for seeing it through. I feel like this is the movie that she intended on making, and she truly made a hell of a movie out of it. And the lead actress, Agatha Roussel, is just brilliant. She doesn't have many lines in the film, but I feel like she says and does so much in this movie and through every sequence that we see her in. So I was very, very, captured by this film. And I just remember the car drive home was like, I was just sitting there in silence, kind of trying to think back to everything that I'd just seen, trying to process it. But it was a wild time, and I think it'll be divisive for a lot of people, but I know that I really enjoyed it.
Oh, so extremely divisive. I didn't want to be in a car right after I watched this movie. I was too scared.
Yeah, probably not the best idea.
Who can trust cars? Yeah, no wonder you were sitting in silence. I don't know what I would have done. Did you see this on the big screen?
I did, yes.
Okay. So nobody saw it at a drive-in.
Nobody saw it in a drive-in, not me at least.
I can't imagine the drive-in that would play this. Also, I want to believe that Julia Ducournau, like her daily life is like play some Candyland. It's like actually like super generic. Even though she makes these movies, she's like goes to the dollar store one day,
watches like a Disney movie.
Yeah, she watches like the Avengers or something. It's just like, what an interesting use of that color palette. Yeah, so Will, I have no idea what you think of this movie, Will. You just watched it. I know you saw it on the big screen just today. So you're
Yes.
fresher on this movie than two of us. I saw it at home last week, and I imagine if like Emma's like sort of in the front seat, she's just like taking this movie in stride, loving it. I'm cringing in the back seat. I'm just like, I got my seatbelt on more than once, if that even makes sense. I can't even look. But where are you in the car?
I'm definitely about it. I mean, I knew going into it that I probably wouldn't have the exact same reaction that I had to Raw, in that Raw had the surprise factor that this movie just wouldn't have, because not only had I seen Raw, but there was the expectations with it winning the Palme d'Or and getting all this acclaim and Neon giving it a wide release, which I think that's probably the thing that surprised me the most, is seeing this in AMC theater. Is just like so wow to me that this got like a fairly wide release. I mean, not like in like every city and every theater, but like enough to where like I'm impressed that Neon has full faith in this film and really went all out with this release. It's very exciting to me. But yeah, I mean, I definitely was all about it. The only bad thing for me is that I feel like I am still processing the film, as Emma mentioned. Like, having just seen the film, I imagine my thoughts will be broader and a little bit more expansive a day or so from today, or obviously like a week or a month from now, when I can really think and chew on this film more. But just my first initial out of the theater reaction is just very positive. I mean, I love how much energy and enthusiasm that how you pronounce her name, Julia I want to make sure I don't Ducournau. Yeah, I mean, it's just so wonderful to see a filmmaker who just full throttle just goes all out. And this movie's no pun intended there. Just really like has a clear vision, really is bold and provocative in what she wants to do and say as a filmmaker, using these expansive metaphors, but saying a lot more, something very dense and compact, as she did with Raw as well. I mean, I feel like almost describing them as just like body horror films cheapens what she's trying to do. I know she mentioned as much in the interview that I was talking about with you earlier, where it just feels like she clearly has a lot she wants to say with these films, and she uses these bold ideas to communicate stuff that's very human and present and raw and tender. And I think that's no exception here. I think she only gets more confident as a filmmaker with this film. And I love that she, like you were mentioning before, has more of a cerebral dream-esque vision here. Like, it's not that Raw was like super connected to reality, but it feels like this one is more at peace with, like we were saying before, like her vision, what she wanted to do, making a film that is so striking and unique to her style and her vision. And yeah, I mean, I hope I have more concrete things to say later, but for now, I'm just coming out of it very enthused and very excited for what she has in store as an up-and-coming filmmaker. Yeah, exactly.
You're still working on it. Yeah, you'll get there. I'm so curious. Like, were you two like stressed out during this movie? Because I was kind of stressed out. Because like, and not in a bad way or anything. Like for me, this movie, yeah, it's like a body horror movie. But I think related to, as I mentioned before, when I rewatched Raw, I think what made me understand that movie a little bit better, understand the positives of that movie a bit better, I should say, is that I think Julia Ducournau is kind of to what you're saying, Will, about the body horror thing. It's more like she's trying to say that human beings you don't need body horror. Like we're horrible. We are just like humans, just do and act and say and act like monsters, like little monsters. And you don't need horror or supernatural, anything like that to make the point of it. So I kind of like how in this movie, the whole time, everything that I'm seeing that is just so whoa and out there, it doesn't even really compare to how I feel when something super violent happens, like totally removed from any of that stuff, if that makes any sense. Like that's what I've been kind of chewing on. And I also really appreciate that this is a horror movie about these themes and it has these messages, but it's not like super religious about it. I think we get so many movies that are about like horror and like the connections between horror and religion, which is totally great, but I think we get an overabundance of that almost. This is like a way more secular and humanistic take on horror, which I think we could use a lot more of because there's a lot to say in that respect. But yeah, I was stressed out. Emma, you've had more time with this movie. I mean, what did you think of like the two performances here? Because the two main ones, we've kind of already talked about Agathe Roussel and Vincent Lindon, and how he kind of shows up in this movie and the movie kind of like changes. We don't want to say anything too specific there, but I was kind of feeling at times like, whose movie is this? And is that the right question to ask? What do you think?
I've heard that argument too, where, you know, it definitely is a very different movie from what we're starting off with, versus what direction we go toward. And sometimes I was, you know, questioning Alexia's motivations and really trying to understand what is at the root of everything that she's doing in this film. But yes, I did feel a lot of stress for pretty much anybody who got in her way / you know, was at all connected to her. We see sometimes how she treats fans. We see how she treats, you know, people that she may be interested in pursuing intimately. We see how she has, like, how her relationships are with fathers and father figures, whoever it may be, mother figures in her life. So she's just a really bad person to have in your life. I think that's the best way to put it. She brings a lot of stress and a lot of chaos into people's lives. And I know I felt that. I mean, like I said, I was really like cringing and gasping at a lot of things that were going on. But, you know, also to your point about like the body horror, you know, I guess just what makes these things so horrific is the fact that, you know, there aren't crazy special effects that are happening here in terms of like, you know, when you think of a movie that is so full of special effects, like crazy bodies exploding or, you know, things of that nature, like that stuff is crazy. But a lot of the things that we're seeing in this film are all kind of based in reality and what happens on a daily basis, unfortunately, and like a lot of the scenes that we see in here. So I just feel like the fact that this film is rooted in reality in some ways, aside from kind of the big spoiler that we don't want to talk about, that just made me so stressed out too, because I'm like, oh my God, this is stuff that happens to people. This is stuff that could happen to anybody. And, you know, that hairpin is very a big part of all of that. So, you know, that stressed me out, and just seeing her go through this journey that she eventually goes through with Vincent Lindon's character, and their two lives getting intertwined in a way. And some secrets that are being kept during that time, just all of that. It keeps you on the edge of your seat the entire time, and you're just kind of like holding your breath, wondering what's about to happen to either person.
Yeah, that's so interesting, because I had like a very weird thought while I was watching this, where I was like, this feels like a director's first film to me. And I'm not saying that to be negative or anything, because it just has so many ideas. Like sometimes you watch a movie from a director and it's their first time making a movie, and it almost feels like, I've heard Alonso Duralde say this a lot. He's kind of mentioned how like sometimes it just feels like it's stuffed because the director's not sure they're going to make another movie. So they're like, I got to put in all this stuff.
I had the exact opposite reaction. I felt like this was very much a sophomore feature, because the first film first, like, it's just like, all right, I just want to prove myself. I want to just show what I can do. And it does really well. It's like, oh, okay, you guys like this? And it's like, well, I have all these ideas. And it's like, you're obviously like, she's emboldened because she, got so much praise for her first film, but also just like, she has the confidence to kind of do different things and experiment. So I got to push back on that. I actually feel like this was very much.
I think it could be both in a way. Well, it sounds like you agree that she could be doing that sort of thing, but for different motivations, I guess. But I guess that's why I had that thought, because it tends to be that directors do that on the first film. But I think there's a lot of validity to what you're saying. So I also, I was struggling a bit to be like, okay, what is she trying to say? And I was confused by certain things in this movie. And I think a thing to remember is that I don't even know if we mentioned this, but it is a French film, and I think I got to
you
a
don't
point.
Say.
I know, right? If you haven't seen the trailer, but I think there is an element to this that like it can be hard for us Americans, to like really identify. I think this movie is very much specific. Like this is like, I think Durcono is saying, and I think this is what she is saying. Like this is what it's like to be a French woman right now. And I think it's probably extremely different from, her take on like European culture versus kind of what it's like to be a woman in America right now. So I think that's why I think like a lot of the hyper violence and a lot of like the imagery and stuff that happens throughout this film happens the way it does. But that's just my theory on it. Emma, you really liked it. Like you really liked this movie, but would you watch this one again? Like you kind of said you were one and done on Raw, but what about this?
I think I would watch this one again. I think it would take me a little bit of time, though, to get to it, just because there are some very shocking things that you see in here. And usually I like to, pat myself on the back as saying, like, I'm a big horror person, so not a lot of things can, scare me, and jump scares don't get to me. But yeah, this is definitely quite violent. Not too crazy for my liking, but it still kind of got me to like cringe and be like, oh my god, what the hell is happening right now? But I would definitely try to see this again. I think it does take a little bit of time for us to really understand what the film is about, and I think at the end, I think it really heavily does focus on relationships that people have with certain people, and forming bonds, whether they're conventional or unconventional bonds. I think that's one of the main themes that comes through, at least for me here. And also, stay away from cars. That's also my lesson here.
Yeah. I think this movie is going to be like dissected and analyzed for a long time. I mean, there's all sorts of things in here that we could talk about all day in terms of like what this movie, like allegories this movie has about transgenderism. You could put stuff like that into it. You could there's all kinds of nuances, like the fact that like the idea of being titanium, like what does that mean? And I don't know, I'm still I'm chewing on it still, and I can't wait to read more and more about the movie as we kind of proceed. I don't think this will be like a big awards movie necessarily, except for maybe some like Independent Spirits Awards or things like that. But pretty soon we'll get into what the critical reaction is. But what do you think, Will?
Well, I'm curious about that, because if it did win the Palme d'Or, it does have a better than decent chance of being nominated for Best Foreign Language Film at the Oscars.
That's
not
true.
To make this an awards thing, but I don't know. I mean, if they don't nominate it, I don't know what the other nominees will be at this point, but I think it would be their loss. Like it's, watching this and Raw, I can't imagine watching these films and not having a reaction, good or bad, though it may be. Like, I don't feel like you can watch your films and not have some sort of like provoked reaction watching these. So, whether that plays into the favor of a film's potential awards consideration or not, I guess it's neither here nor there. But I think this one is obviously going to blow up her profile in a big way. And like I said, I'm really excited to see where she goes from here.
Yeah, this is definitely not like a flop for her.
No, I'm really excited to see what other ideas she has. I'd kind of like to also just see like her do a quote unquote more normal movie, although it doesn't seem like that's her style. And, you know, like I said, she really is such a creative mind, and she's doing things that, you know, we don't see a whole lot of other directors doing and going in a certain direction. So I think that makes it fun. I think that's what makes her films so enjoyable. So she's totally deserving of all praise that is coming her way, and hopefully we'll see what happens with the rest of this award season. I know we're just about to get started with it soon enough.
I will work hard with the two of you to make sure Marvel does not call her. We'll interfere with all of the incoming.
Don't need that.
Every event where if Kevin Feige comes up to her, you take care of that?
Sure.
I'll cover her 6.
But no, I was to Emma's point. I was thinking about how Ari Aster, after he made Midsummer, was like, he was just like, you know, I think I'm just gonna do a romantic comedy after this. Like, not jokingly, I think he was just like, yeah, you know, like I did 2 very intense, stressful films. Maybe I just want to do something goofy and lighthearted next. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if she said the same thing. Just like, yeah, I just want to make like a nice, sweet, you know, movie about people in a cottage or something. I imagine it would take a turn, but yeah.
And honestly, I did think about him when I was thinking about, you know, other directors who kind of go there with their films. So I'm glad that you brought him up.
Yeah, I was thinking of Cronenberg a bit, and I think
oh yeah, Cronenberg's a big
for sure.
One.
But that's the thing. Like, and I was also thinking of like, man, you know, Ducournau, is she going to be like the next Claire Denis? You know, she's just going to like always like have this reputation for always doing her own thing. You know, just being this director who every movie she makes is one of a kind and doesn't compromise, but also stretches boundaries. I mean, one of her most recent films, High Life, was such a like, you know, excellent sci-fi film. It was something so different from what she'd done before. And that's what I want from this director more and more. So I'm happy to see the big difference already, because Ra and Titane are just so different. Like, you could tell, like, they have the director's stamp on them. Like, there is connective tissue between the two movies, but wow, are they so different, you know, and in so many other relevant ways. So I think that's really cool as well. All right, so it sounds like the 3 of us recommend this movie, and you know, it's hard to say who to recommend this movie for. I do think this is a case where, like, I think we've kind of gone across, like, this is not for the faint of heart. You know, if you're unsure about watching the movie, this might be one of those cases where watching the trailer might be good to sort of help set your expectations. But, you know, obviously, if you're like a cinephile, if you feel like you really want to see the most avant-garde, cutting-edge cinema of the year, this definitely should be on your list, in my opinion. And I don't want to assume that for the 2 of you, but definitely interrupt me if you disagree. But let's play our little game. Emma, so Will and I play a game every week here on Cinemaholics where we try to guess the Rotten Tomatoes score. And I didn't want to, like, you know, warn you about this, because, you know, I get the temptation to be like, all right, well, maybe I'll just scroll down in this webpage here and see what the Rotten Tomatoes score is and impress all the Cinemaholics listeners. But I don't even know, Emma, have you seen the Rotten Tomatoes score for this movie yet?
No, I haven't actually. I've been, you know, I kind of have been not avoiding stuff after I've seen this movie. I've been keeping up with a few interviews, but not looking in terms of what the general broader audience has been saying.
Okay. All right. Well, we're gonna break that for you. Sorry. But part of our game is guessing what the score is. And Will thinks he's pretty good at this game, and I'll give him this much. He does better than most, I think. But yeah. So you're just gonna call a number anywhere in the Rotten Tomato meter, and let's see what happens. And we'll also do the audience score too. I did look it up, and there's no cinema score, so sorry, we're not going to do cinema score this week. But Emma, what is your best guess for the Rotten Tomatoes score for this movie? I'll give you one hint: 125 reviews have been counted, so it does have a critic consensus.
And we're just focusing on critics, or are we considering everything?
Starting with critics, and then we'll do audience score.
I think for critics, it would probably be maybe like 75%.
All right, so we got you guessing 75. Will Ashton, what do you think?
I'm going to go higher. I'm going to say 89%.
So Will wins. Will was a bit closer. He was a little too high, so it's 86%, right? As we're recording this, it could still move, of course. But yeah, 86%. So Emma, I would have guessed around the same as you. I would have guessed like upper 70s. Because I've seen some critics be kind of like cold on the movie, but
I'm happy that it's that high of a score. That's great.
Yeah, it's great news. You like the movie, for sure. Okay, audience score. So the hint for this is there's not a lot of verified ratings. It says 50 plus. Usually it's, it can be as high as like 5,000 plus or whatever. But 50 plus verified ratings. So these are people who it's verified that they saw the movie. I still don't understand technically how they verify that, but whatever. What do you think the audience score might be?
Oh boy. Because I feel like it is definitely a decisive film, I'm going to say that's probably lower, maybe let's say 67%.
Okay, 67% is your guess. What about you, Bo?
This one's tricky, yeah, because like we said before, considering how divisive the movie is going to be in principle, and I don't exactly know who it would be tallied in this, but I'm going to go 66%.
So you're in you both are in the same ballpark, but you're both way off. This movie has an 82% audience score right now.
I guess people who really wanted to see this movie went and saw this movie then.
Right. I think a lot of people people who saw this at festivals, because we are recording this the day it's coming out. So not a lot of people in the general public have watched this movie in theaters. So I think it might have gotten a European release that I'm unaware of, something like that. But I think, yeah, that's probably the case. It's these are people who love film and have probably done the effort to see this movie early. So it is a bit of a skewed sample. Definitely check it out. It's probably going to change and all of that. But I think that's pretty promising. 82% is pretty high.
That's pretty good.
Guess that high.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
All right. Well, speaking of pretty good, I think this is a pretty good time for us to bow out. And Emma, we really appreciate you coming on the show and sharing your thoughts on Titane. It was really cool having you here.
Thank you guys so much for having me. This is a very fun show, and hopefully I can come back on whenever you need me.
Yeah, whenever you want. Just send us a message all right, guys, I know you're going to mess up this review, so,
The pronunciation is going to be off. And hopefully the audience trusts me after I suggested Herbie Fully Loaded. Hopefully we have established a bond here.
I think they'll trust you way more than otherwise, to be totally honest. But we have some weird listeners; they're great. But yeah, we'll plug your Twitter in the show notes. But is there anything else you want to plug for the listeners before we head out?
You know what? I do weekly reviews for Next Best Picture. So if you guys are ever interested in reading my thoughts, I tweet those out, and my Twitter is @Emma_Sasek. So let me know what you guys think of some of the movies that I see.
Sounds great. Thanks again. Next week, we are going to be talking about, what are we talking about next week, Will Ashton? I already forgot what's coming out. Lamb, there's a few things.
I was going to say, Last Duel and Halloween Kills are probably the big one. Halloween Kills is probably the biggest, since that's going to be on Peacock as well.
But the reviews, Will Ashton, I'm hearing it's garbage. I mean, we're going to see it.
But it's October. I mean, it's Halloween season. So, yeah.
We can't review the first Halloween instead, like the John Carpenter first one.
I mean, there's nothing in the rule book like Air Bud that says we can't.
All right, well, I'll consult the Cinemaholics gods about that. But yeah, we'll talk about that movie most likely. There's also Mass, and I don't know if I'm still hoping to talk to Matt Serafini about Muppets Haunted Mansion. Will I got to ask him? We'll see. We'll see if he says yes or hell yes.
He would
be one of those two.
Almost certainly say yes. I think so.
Lots of stuff coming out. It's going to be a busy October, but we'll see you all next week. Thanks again for listening. If you like our show, don't forget you can rate it on Apple Podcasts. It's so easy. And we actually, Will, I haven't even told you this yet. We got a few emails after that last call. Apparently, we ruffled.
Nice.
We got some people talking. They're all good emails.
Maybe.
Don't worry.
Okay,
I'll share them with you shortly. But we'll do a little bit more listener feedback coming up soon. But we're going to head out for now. So signing off from the Internet California, I'm John Negroni.
From the Internet Pennsylvania, I'm Will Ashton.
See you next time.